RaceRoom Racing Experience is the hardest sim in the world, but it's not hard to drive, and it's not even hard to get wins. What's hard about RaceRoom Racing Experience is talking about it. For any game to capture your attention, it usually needs a hook, something special that it does better than anything else out there. You might play GT Sport if you're a fan of stunning visuals and instant racing. Maybe iRacing is your thing if you want to simulate a realistic racing weekend. Maybe you want to kick back and revel in the mayhem that was Group B in Art of Rally. Each of these games has something special that they do right, and if that thing is important to you, then that game is going to be important to you. The problem RaceRoom faces is that while it doesn't really do much wrong, it doesn't do anything particularly right either. It has over 50 tracks and about 200 cars, which is an average level of content for a sim racer. 12 cars and 5 tracks are free, which again for a subscription-based racer is about par for the course. Even the prices per car and per track aren't especially cheap, nor are they especially high. Average is the word of the day here. The very first thing you are likely to do in RaceRoom is to hit that single player button. And that's fine for learning the track and testing graphical settings, but if you want a strong single player experience focused on racing cars, then this isn't the best game for you. There are much better options out there. Multiplayer is what this game was made for, but to get there is a menu to navigate. What makes the UI somewhat worse than it seems is that everything on the right is just one big image that links to the multiplayer page. You can click on what it says is a rookie race only to be presented with this screen of races you cannot enter and some private servers. But once you figure out what the checkboxes at the top do, you're all set. Kind of. The one other major thing you need to learn here is what purple means. It's not explained anywhere on the screen as far as I can tell, but any event listed in purple means that you need to buy something to enter the race. And if you have the only owned tracks checkbox checked at the top, then it can only mean that you need to buy a car to enter that event. And let's just forget that the previous screen promised us daily races. They change weekly. And I thought GT Sport was the only game featuring weekly daily races. And it's at this point I should mention that, like iRacing, RaceRoom does track your progress as a driver, this time via reputation and rating. Reputation is all about safety, and rating is based on how well you do in races. But honestly, it won't take long for you to be able to enter whatever race you want. Leveling up is so easy that you really only need to worry about owning the content for the more advanced events. Though sometimes you might want to worry about your reputation just a little, as on some tracks it's super easy to accidentally cut a corner lap after lap. And while the in-game penalty for doing this literally goes away if you ignore it, this will impact your reputation. Overall, the UX of RaceRoom is passable. Where the developers score points for things like their excellent in-car view setup screen, they lose them again for not setting up my wheel, which is just lazy. Once into a race you have the usual setup. Practice, qualifying, and race. How long you get to practice depends entirely on how early you join a race, and qualifying usually gives you enough time for a handful of laps. You can race competitively just by jumping straight in and driving. At most you might want to adjust the traction control or the brake bias, and that's if you remember to map them to your wheel. Of course, the full car mechanic experience is available to you if you know your camber from your caster. This is of course all dependent on whether you can find anyone to race with at all. Stick to the more popular races though, and when the lights go out, the racing is actually quite fun. The physics might not be perfect. The cars seem to bounce just a bit too much, and weather effects? Forget it. But there is enough depth here to make you really worry about locking up when trying to defend a position or to gingerly take a corner with a huge bump on the inside, because you know it can completely take out your entire suspension. This makes for some surprisingly tight and clean racing. Maybe I've just been lucky, but I've rarely encountered anyone actually racing dirty in RaceRoom. Lots of hard racing, sure. Even the occasional lag glitch trying to end my whole career. But going in blind, I expected this game to be a bit of a mess in the lower classes, but it's just not the case. Whether racing against a full grid or just a handful of players, I've managed to find good racing everywhere. And because the racing is fun, I can forget about the graphics, which is great because they are forgettable. What even is this thing in the background? A blanket mountain? But complaining about graphics in PC sims is like shooting fish in a barrel. So let's talk about the sound, because RaceRoom does sound quite well. There is the usual engine note, but layered on top we have blow-off valves, transmission whine, little squeaks. The wail when you lock a brake is particularly useful to let you know when you are just stepping a little bit too far over the line. Let's take a listen to what are likely the first couple of cars you'll hear in iRacing versus the first few encounters with RaceRoom Experience. Different cars for sure, but the difference in audio complexity should be clear to everyone. My overall impression of RaceRoom Racing Experience is a strange one. While I bemoan the lack of choice in events, often there is just one single race with enough players to form a race, and it's usually one you've done before, and the poor graphics and the lack of weather effects, I still usually come away from every single race with a smile on my face. But at the same time, when I walk away from the game, I feel no great desire to return to it. It doesn't engender any passion. Now, this takes us right back to where we started. I can see people being passionate about iRacing. You can lose yourself in the seriousness of it all, modeling every aspect of a race weekend and trying to rise through the ranks, improving your iRating and license. And I can see people being passionate about a game like GT Sport with its unmatched presentation and a different kind of racing where you don't care about flat spotting a tire or damaging your suspension. Instead, every race is about fierce concentration, hammering out perfect qualifying laps after qualifying lap until you get that win. RaceRoom Racing Experience has no such hook. There's nothing particularly special about it. And that's a shame because this game is more than the sum of its average parts. Go in with no expectations and just give it a try. You never know, you might just like it.